Hello, podcast listeners, and hello to our special guest, Rashidah Cartwright, my friend and inspiration. Welcome to the show, Rashidah.
Oh my God, thank you so much. I'm so excited. You are a friend to me, definitely.
I'm so glad. So, I met Rashidah back in the day when I was teaching yoga at behavioral health facilities and halfway houses, and I came across this beautiful shining star, and I'm so glad that we have, lasted past through COVID and everything that
Yes,
happened.
yes,
But
yes.
the reason you're on the show is because you're doing some really important work. And typically, the Pebble in Your Shoe podcast tries to highlight people that are in their third chapter. And you're not quite there yet,
Not
but
yet.
you're going to be someday, um, God willing, right? So I wanted to bring you on just so that people would be aware of the important work you're doing, and it actually impacts us all. And I really feel that you're a person who is living your um, dharma. I want to say like yoga words here, but your true purpose has been through your children, and it's, I guess, been by necessity. But anyway, tell us a little bit about yourself and what your current project is.
Okay, so again, thank you, Alona, for having me on the show. I'm so excited to be able to talk to you as well as the listeners out there. And most importantly, I am a mom. I have four children, with two that have a diagnosis of autism. One child has a diagnosis of autism and ADHD. The other child, autism, and then just recently we figured out that he is actually blind in one eye. And so, if we go, talk about my journey, it was a difficult road because I didn't know what autism was. I remember watching like Rain Man, and that's like as close as I got to it. And when, and I guess we'll get into like how that diagnosis came to be, but through the pain, through the frustrations, I ended up deciding to create a podcast called Autism for Badass Moms. It was just basically a need to highlight the emotional journey that us moms go through. A lot of times we focus on the child's needs and then we put ourselves, on the back burner. And I just want people to know that we matter and that it's important to know what the caretaker is going through so that you can best support that caretaker as long and also the child.
Right, right. So when I was growing up, there were no autistic children in my class. So that was in the 70s. And I think that what you're doing is such a service because the children, well, they're more visible now, right? They're integrated into schools, but the
Yes.
mothers are invisible. And I think that you give them support and you see them. And I think that's what is so important. In this time in the world, we're starting to see groups of people pop up and, hey, we're here. And I think
Absolutely.
that's what you're doing.
Yeah, and again, I focus on moms. I mean, it does affect fathers, it does affect grandparents because sometimes the grandparents have to step into that role because maybe the parents are not able to, or even when that parent wants to take some time to go out and do things, it's important for that grandparent to kind of understand the behaviors and know how to support that child. So again, this is just means so much to me. It touches me because again, having two children with autism, but again, like you, I didn't know anybody with autism. And with my first son, and again, with getting the diagnosis, I didn't even know what to look for. I
So,
didn't
so
know.
tell us, how did it happen? How did you realize that something was going on?
So typically what happens is most autism parents will tell you that it usually they get they get the diagnosis or the concern from the pediatrician. So in having my first son, I didn't, again, know what milestones, what age he should be walking, talking, speaking, all that, crawling. And it wasn't until we went for the typical well visit. He had to be, I guess he was like around 2. And the doctor was asking all these questions and he had his like folder out. I can remember it like it was yesterday, his folders out. And he wasn't like checking boxes, right? he didn't check the box that he was walking on time, didn't check the box that he was battling on time. And I felt that there was something wrong just based on him, just kind of his look, his pausing. And then he asked me and my husband at the time, have you ever heard of autism? I was like, no, like I've never heard of autism. I don't even know why he's bringing this up. And then he said, you know, I'm a little concerned that he may have autism because he is not meeting the milestones. And so what he did was wrote, I guess it was like a script. He says, I'm going to give you the number to early intervention. You call them and then they'll reach out and they'll come assess him. It was so cold. There was no more conversation. I had so many questions, but then again, I froze. It's almost like fight or flight. I froze. And so on that ride home, my husband and I were just kind of not even speaking to each other. It was just like, what just happened here? We did not expect to go in to learn that there was something that was different about our child. And so for a period of time, good period of time, I didn't call the number. I didn't call our intervention because I said the doctor doesn't know what he's talking about. And so my family and friends were like, they don't know, the doctor doesn't know what he's talking about. So that kind of supported my thought process. But then when I noticed my son not really making much eye contact, kind of like looking like he was in his own world, focused on like strings, like the little string in the carpet, I was like, I don't know, there may be something to this. I called them, they came out, and I felt like it had to be like 3 minutes before they said, yeah, he has, and at that time it was pervasive developmental disorder. And they diagnosed him with that. And that broke me. That broke me.
And what age was this that you got
He had to
this?
be like, yeah, he was like 3, I want to say at the time.
He was
You
3.
know, he was like 3 when he got the diagnosis, and our world changed right then and there.
So what kind of journey did you go on with him at that point?
So they basically told us that he would need intensive home therapy. So someone would come out to help with like the speech and the occupational. And so it was like every day there was like somebody coming in to give us guidance and tell us like, hey, you need to do this, or when we're not here, this is what you're supposed. So it became overwhelming too. Like it became overwhelming because I still didn't give it time to just really sit, that there was something like that my child was not the typical child. And I wanted my son so bad. I prayed for my son so bad. Even my doctor at that point, we didn't even know if we were able to have kids. So it was just very devastating. I felt guilt. I felt shame. I felt angry and frustrated. And I felt utter sadness and alone.
Mhm.
All of those emotions at once.
And those emotions are what you find when you speak to your podcast
Yes.
guests
Yes.
as well. And do they dissipate or what happens?
So I call it like cyclical, right? So it's not as intense for let's say guilt. It's not as intense as when, again, getting the first diagnosis, because I blame myself. I was like, oh my gosh, maybe I didn't get enough sleep. I was throwing up a lot. Maybe the vitamins didn't get in my system, everything to make it my fault. And as time went on and I got more confident and I learned my son, I realized, you know what? And I met different moms out there. Our stories are so different. So I can't say it was something I did, because I've heard so many different variations of and what they thought was the cause of their child's autism. And so I just kind of, just try to press on. But recently, when my son got the diagnosis of the basically blind, I felt so guilty, because this was something that basically he was born with, and it could have been corrected. It could have been corrected if we knew. And so I blamed myself. But the reason why it wasn't caught was because a lot of times when they do the testing in school, like the vision test and they do those kind of tests in school, if the child has autism, they just kind of like, oh, because the child's not really probably attending, which means they're not really looking at you. They just say, okay, it's we can't really do the assessment, and this is because he has autism. He doesn't make much eye contact. So I went with that. I didn't have any reason to think there was something wrong. And again, he's 13 now, and I think about the signs. Like my son would tilt his head a lot, and I'm like, oh, straighten your head. Why is your head so straighten your head? You got to look straight. And it was because he was trying to see us through his good eye.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it comes and goes.
It just brings a lot up for me as far as doctors doing their jobs, pediatricians, and so you as a parent wouldn't know what to look for in a child who may not have verbal abilities to express. And if you're used to something, if he was born blind, that's his normal, right? Like, or
Yeah.
was he born blind or no?
No, he wasn't born blind. It was amblyopia. I'm probably pronouncing it wrong.
Okay.
So, but if he was wearing, like a lot of times back in the day, they used to use the patch because you
Right.
overuse one eye to make up for the other eye. And so if you, I guess, patch them up earlier or even like give them glasses earlier, the prognosis is better. But here we are now, his eye is just, at a level where
It's considered blind.
yeah,
Yeah.
he's on that cusp. He's on that cusp.
Mm-hmm. So in a lot of ways, the primary doctors are maybe not as skilled as they should be with autistic or children suffering with autism. I mean, are you still finding that it's you have to be the one who's always, running things down as far as their medical problems?
I think doctors have become a little better, especially the pediatricians, with being able to recognize that, hey, there's something a little off here, and I think you should get some help. It is a challenge because having different specialists for different needs, and just being able to, like occupational therapy, like I'm not an occupational therapist and I don't fully, understand. I didn't go to school for it, but sometimes they'll tell you like, oh, your child needs X, Y, and Z. And it's just like, oh, okay. Like this is what you say, and I go based on what you say because you're the professional. So it takes a lot of like learning on our part.
Mhm.
Okay, I'm going to listen to what you say, but I'm also going to do some research so I can bring to you like, hey, I think this would be a better kind of approach for my son, because each autistic child is unique.
What's
And
that saying that you say on your podcast? If you meet a child,
yeah, if you meet one child with autism, you've met one child with autism. They're
right?
not all the same. They're not all the same. Because I have a second son who has,
Right. So, and that became evident to you then too, that they're very
yes.
different. Are they both very different in their autism?
So let me tell you. So I already knew that there was a chance that my second child could have autism. And I was met with a lot of resistance. My older son was going to an out of district school where the kids basically were similar to him, and had the same needs. And so unfortunately the autism moms, at the school were like, are you sure you want to do that? You do want to take the chance? And I was like, oh my God, you're my people. What are you saying? And again, I took the chance because you know what? I love my kid if they don't have an arm. I love them I love them regardless. And so he basically was meeting his milestones a little, not as late as my oldest son, but it wasn't as, his behaviors were different. Because I was hyper focused. I'm like, whoa, okay, you're supposed to be crawling at this age. Let's see what you're doing, and you're supposed to be walking at this age. His was more so, um, again, the eye contact wasn't as long, and he would be lining up like his toys, like perfectly. He was, stand on his tippy toes to like walk around. So kind of like those things were like, let me take him, let me get this early intervention rolling just in case.
And he
And
was
so
diagnosed earlier.
yeah, he was diagnosed earlier. early intervention, stepped in quicker because I didn't delay it this time. I was like, let's just get on it. Let's be proactive. And also he has attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, which kind of, is a struggle sometimes.
The child with blindness is also having
So,
a,
so
oh,
my 9-year-old, who he has ADHD and autism. So
okay.
he's both
Oh,
diagnosed.
the older son has the blindness.
Yes.
Okay, okay. I thought it was the
Yeah.
same. Okay,
No, no worries.
okay. All right. And then you also have a daughter.
Oh, yes.
So were you, when you were pregnant with your daughter, were you out of your mind or?
I was scared. I was
Yes.
scared because what they say is, with daughters, it could be more severe.
Mhm.
And so I remarried. And again, I had obviously autism on my side. I had 2 children. My husband, both his sisters have children with autism. So it was like, oh my gosh, like this is what's going to happen here. And so she was born, she was meeting her milestones, but I was like, I don't know, just in case, just in case. She walked over to me toes one time, and I was like, oh, gotta go get some evaluation. One time.
I would too.
That
I
was
would.
it, one time. And they came out, and it was a really quick assessment. They said she's fine.
Mhm.
She's
Mhm.
fine. It took me a while to like realize, like, oh, what does that mean? Like, oh, okay, I have a
You know what
neurotypical
to do
child.
when you heard that.
Yeah, like, oh my God, it's neurodiversity, neurotypical, and learning how to navigate both, is definitely a challenge.
Yes, yes. So you mentioned, I think you might have had a podcast episode about fight or flight. Is that where I
Yes.
picked that up?
Yes.
So, and also as your friend, I remember you saying one time to me that you were worried that your son was going to pull your hair, and you were afraid, because you weren't sure what his actions would be. So
Yes.
talk to us about living with this fear and not knowing, what's coming next some
Right.
days.
Right. So I'll tell you, I'm 90% of the time I'm in fight or flight, 90% of the time. My one son, again, who's 13 now, struggles with aggression, because he's nonverbal, not being able to communicate, say what he wants. We don't know, like, is his stomach hurting? Does he have a headache? We just have to just try to piece it together. And a lot of times before we can piece it together, he is hitting, spitting, scratching, attacking. Okay. And it is very, like I told you, it is very unpredictable. You could be sitting on the couch and then you're getting a hit or something is happening to you. And so it was the most stressful. I mean, nobody wants their child to harm them. And it's like, kind of like, oh my gosh, my child is like harming me. But I'm constantly in activation mode. I don't know, he stims. So he has like vocalizations. And now I've learned through this journey of autism, the different types of when I should worry and when I can dial it back and be like, oh, he's sad. Because the one that's aggressive is louder and just distressing. And so my body already automatically goes into that fight or flight. I get anxious. I start to panic. I can't breathe. I feel unfocused at periods of time, but I know I have to act and act quickly.
Mm.
And
Just for our listeners, can you describe or explain what stimming means?
so stimming is how a child with autism or an adult with autism regulates um, their body. So it's almost like you're almost hit by a car and uh, and you're not, but then you just kind of sit in the car and just kind of breathe and just try to compose yourself. Or someone who's been in a stressful situation, they go to the bathroom, they put water on their face just to kind of bring their nervous system, back and center it. So for him, it could be going to the store, and he's very sensitive. A lot of autistic children are sensitive to noise. They kind of hear at a higher, I guess, pitch than other children do. So the sounds of the carts moving, people talking is so much louder. And then in order for him to not get as overwhelmed, maybe like lashing out, he may start rocking. He may start thrusting his body a lot. right? To self-soothe. And then he may increasingly vocalize. So you may hear him say, just to get his whole nervous system back in under control.
So it's really a good thing, right? For
Yeah.
stimming, it seems like it's their way to regulate themselves. And I think that you're saying there's some that when you hear certain sounds that it's escalating for him.
Yes, yes. So when he gets like the pitch is higher, maybe deeper, I just know, that, okay, this is not going to be good. And so my body is conditioned to that.
Hmm.
And my body automatically goes into that state. Now, my other son, and he's verbal. And so people think, oh, he's high functioning because he's verbal and he doesn't look autistic, which that drives me crazy. Because people don't know that there's another aspect of autism, which is, again, social interactions and also mood regulation. His mood is very dysregulated. His thought process is black or white, in a sense of like, it's hard for him to see the middle. It's like, this is how I think and that's it. Whatever you tell me, it doesn't align with unless it aligns with what I'm thinking, it's no good.
Hmm.
For example, I'll give you an example. We could say like, hey, tomorrow we're gonna go swimming. And he's like, yeah, yeah, yeah. The next day it's raining. So of course we're not gonna go swimming. And then he'll say, well, you said we were going swimming. Well, it's raining outside. We can't go swimming. And then he has what we call a meltdown. And he's crying. And there's times where he'll take his fist and hit himself in the head.
Hmm.
So it's on a different level, but it still impacts us. It is unpredictable because we don't know, what could set him off.
We don't want him hurting himself.
No, no.
So this is why women, mothers, families need support, because there's just not much, out there. There's no one coming to your house and helping you. That's what I'm trying to say. You have to figure it out. You're the parents, and that's what the service is that you're offering in a way to listeners of your podcast.
Mhm.
And so tell us how that podcast, Autism for Badass Moms, came to be.
It came out of frustration. So when my first son was diagnosed, I didn't know any other moms or anyone. And when he began school, I'm a working mom. So I didn't see the moms like, in the morning time, or the moms, after, because I was rushing, I was busy. And then they were busy dealing with their child with autism. And I said, I want to like meet people. Like I know there's people out there like me. And so I looked at some support groups, and they didn't exist anymore. Everyone that I tried, it was like, I was getting frustrated, like just nothing. And so what I decided to do was, I said, you know what, if there's none, I'm going to create one. And I did. I created a support group, and it was in a local library. And I think only like 2 people showed up. And I was devastated because I'm like, oh my gosh, like only 2 people showed up. But I had therapists from my nonprofit who were there to support me, which was so amazing. Like, no, don't give up. Just keep going, keep going. Because I wanted to give up. It's only 2 people. Maybe nobody cares. Then COVID happened, the shutdown, and everything was virtual. And for children with disabilities, it was a nightmare, a nightmare. So someone's like, oh, do a virtual support group. And I'm like, yeah. And that support group got so big, and we had people from various states. I met people in like California, everywhere, who,
Texas, yeah, I remember that.
yes, yes, every week we would just kind of log on and just kind of check in to see how each other's were and develop resources. And then I said, you know what, I'm going to take it to the next level, because I feel like there are, again, globally, there's so many autism moms out there. And I said, you know what, let me try to do a podcast and get it out to more people, because I want to help.
Mhm.
And it took a year or so before I could get the confidence to actually do it. And now that I've done it, right now, like on Instagram, I got like over 5,000 followers, and moms just out there saying like, thank you so much for doing this.
Now, I noticed, are you doing seasons or you just keep going? Because it seems like there's always a new one.
So initially I was like, let me do seasons because that's what all the famous people do. Let me do season one, season two. But you know what? There's a need to connect with people, each week. They tune in each week to hear either their story or someone else's story, to give them hope, to validate their experience, to know that they're not alone. So it's every week, once a week, where they are allowed to like just kind of have their own space, their self-care.
Mhm. Mhm. So, what has been some of the feedback that you've received?
Yeah, I didn't realize how impactful it would be. I don't know what I thought was going to happen, but so many moms have reached out saying, thank you so much. Thank you for this platform. Thank you for naming it Autism for Badass Moms, because the badass is changing the narrative from, you know what, I'm disempowered, I feel weak, I don't think I can do this, to like, you know what, that you get up every day to do the same, either the same thing or not knowing what battles you may face throughout the day, that makes you so badass. There
True.
are people out there who wouldn't want to do what we do, could not do what we wanted to do, or know how to do. And so that is, it's just a huge deal. It's a huge deal. And I think, like, again, all the moms out there and providers, it's not just moms, there's providers now, dads are like, we need a podcast for dads. And I'm like, well, there is one. But
There
make your
is?
own.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's
You
called
don't
a
have to do everything,
yeah,
Rashidah.
yeah,
Let
yeah.
them do something. And
Yes,
yes,
yeah.
yes. You know, I am, I've always been interested in, I wanted to be a special education teacher. My
Mhm.
dad talked me out of it. I never did it, but I have an interest in people who are on the spectrum. I watch those shows, Love on the Spectrum, because it reminds me that, the people that were kept hidden when I grew up are out there, and they're just like me. They're human beings. And
Yes.
I love seeing, when they want to match up, they want to get married, and they want all the same things that everybody else wants. And I wonder how you are preparing for that day when your sons will be adults, and like, what do you think the future holds for them?
It's hard because it's very anxiety provoking,
To think
especially for
about
my, yeah, it's very anxiety provoking, specifically for my oldest, who is nonverbal, and his needs, he doesn't know how to open certain things. Like there's a lot of things that he needs someone's assistance with.
it. Hmm.
Will he ever drive a car? The probability is maybe not,
Hmm.
right? Does he know how to tie his shoelaces? No,
Hmm.
but are they that important, right?
Right.
So it is scary, because I'm not going to live forever. And then there's the who's going to take care of my child when I'm gone, and guardianship that happens when they turn 18. It's just a lot of fear and anxiety. I'm trying to be hopeful and optimistic, but I'm also realistic
Hmm.
in his abilities.
Hmm.
Um, and again, his siblings are so amazing. My daughter is just all over him, and just, she's, his partner. But I don't have an expectation that my kids will take care of him. Some moms put that on the other child, and I don't think that's fair.
Hmm.
When I'm gone to take care of them, they can make their own choice, but I will plan accordingly for him.
Yes. I think that you should have a guest on about that at least. I mean, I don't know if you've had one yet, because it's a big deal. And
It's
I hate to see you like you're always in fight or flight, and we really need to support people like you, that they don't have to worry about everything all the time. Besides, that you have other children. So, how do you, and I know this is a jerky question, a stupid question, like, how do you take care of your child or children without autism? Like, how do they factor into the equation? And as a mom, I never had enough time for anything, and I was working like you, and I don't think that I gave my children equal attention, and I didn't have anybody on the spectrum. So, how are you dealing with that?
Day by day, it
Mhm,
is so challenging because again, my oldest son's he has more needs.
mhm,
And I don't want uh, the other kids, my daughter who is neurotypical, I don't want her to feel left out, like because there's times where she's like, Mom, can you look at this? Mom, hey, can you see? And I'm focused on like, hey, I don't want my son hurting anybody.
mhm.
And sometimes kids don't understand that. So I do the best that I can with the resources that I have. I try to find little pockets of time individually with each of them. And maybe just sitting in the bedroom, just talking, chatting it up. Um, but I don't know if it's possible to give each child equal attention. You know, I'm a mom. I'm doing a good enough job. I used to be a perfectionist. Like I need to be a good mom, but I'm like, you know what? I'm good enough. I'm doing what I can. And again, the other kids, they're just very like supportive. And my daughter, she's might as well be his mom. So,
So
but
she's
it,
like a little mother.
oh my goodness, she
I
runs the
think
whole
girls
ship.
are just that way. They're nurturing,
Yeah,
and yeah,
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 but it's a challenge.
it is a challenge. So, what would you say is the most important lesson you've learned for yourself in the past 13 years?
The to take time for me, because I was, you know, I have like multiple jobs. I, I'm, you know,
You're still doing all those jobs. Oh my.
you know, again,
You're
for
a mompreneur.
yes, yes. I was working in the psychiatric emergency room. I did eventually let that go to be able to do the podcast because I knew I wouldn't be able to do all these things. And I'm also working for a nonprofit as a mental health and substance use disorder clinician and a mom, right? So I'm wearing a lot of hats, you know,
So,
and
so what does making time for yourself look like?
it would be, you know, and it's so hard. If you ask an autism mom about self-care, they'll be like, who has time for that?
Mhm,
Um, but it's little pockets of time. You know, there's no grand like getting my nails done. Like, you know, once in a blue moon, that's nice. But it may be just playing with like apps on the phone. Like I just got into like puzzles. I didn't know I liked puzzles, but it really focuses me and distracts me from everything else that's going on, which is amazing. Listening to music when I go to work or leave work is so instrumental because it gives me that kind of wind down kind of, okay, it's just me. I can listen to whatever music I want. I imagine myself on a stage like Beyonce and I feel good and I feel good. Or eating a meal that I like. Now I've been looking at the sunrise because I didn't realize that existed. Um, so it's just like little things that I'm enjoying that is making me happy. Or watching a series on Netflix.
we all do that, and we all do that. What is the work that you're most proud of doing?
The podcast,
The podcast.
the podcast. That is that is at it's right up there with my kids. The podcast because it is changing lives. It is empowering moms. You know, I empower moms to start your own podcast because there's only so many people that I will reach and touch in the manner that I do it, right?
Mhm,
But another mom can touch people in the manner that she was gifted with doing. And so my work is to just help moms know that there is hope because hope is everything. If you don't have hope, then it's, you know, why get out of bed? You know,
mhm,
why shower? Why do this anymore? Because the reality is that suicidality, thoughts of suicide is common and depression is common amongst moms who have a child. There's moms who have 4 or 5 kids that are on the autism spectrum with various different abilities.
mhm,
There's moms out there that have a child with significant aggression. I've met a mom who had bite marks all down both of her arms and bruising all down her arms. And that was on a regular basis.
mhm.
And so just giving them the ability to know, like, you are not, the power in you are not alone.
Mhm.
right? Like, right now you may be sitting in your closet crying, not understanding like, how am I going to get out of this and why me and all these things. But just to know that there's somebody else that is having a bad day too. Like that helps me a lot. Like knowing that, all right, today seems so wonky, but you know what? There's maybe 100,000 autism moms out there that are feeling the same way I'm feeling right now. And it keeps me pushing.
Is there a thread that you notice with every interview of a need that every autism mom has? Is it the rest and relaxation, time for themselves, or what is it?
To be heard,
To be heard.
to be heard. I think a lot of times, um, people feel that they're being helpful by trying to tell you like, hey, did you look at the most recent research? Maybe you should do gluten-free and maybe you should do this to be able to manage the behaviors. Maybe you should try ABA. But just to be heard, someone to be able to like, yeah, today was a hard day. Today I felt like, why am I here anymore? Today I felt like checking myself into the hospital. Today I felt like drinking 2 bottles of wine. Just to be heard and validated, like, yeah, that must be tough. That must be rough. I can't imagine what you're going through, goes such a long way.
Mm. You've mentioned this a couple times. Is this suicide ideation? Is that a big problem for moms?
Yeah, it definitely is. On one of my episodes, a mom, I think it's like the third episode, she talks about that she did contemplate suicide. And a lot of times it's because there's not a lot of resources out there. Uh, you may not have friends or family that are supportive. You're feeling like you're alone in this. You're feeling guilty about what's going on. And so, in order to escape that constant pain, moms do get to that point where it's like, maybe life would be better off if I wasn't here, because
Mm.
that'll stop the pain. And that is common.
So what is it? What can we do as maybe grandparents or friends of parents who have children that are neurodiverse? What can we do? What's the right thing? Because I always feel like, you know, I don't know what to do. Like, what can I do?
Mhm. It's almost like when you think about like grief, you lose someone,
Right. I was just going to
and
say, it's just like
right.
somebody dies. Like,
Oh,
oh,
it's
I want to do something, but I don't know
yes,
what.
yeah, you want to do something, you want to fix it, you want to say things will be okay in the future, in time you'll get old past this, and just all those cliche things that people say to make themselves feel okay, right? Instead of just, what can I do for you? If
Mhm.
there's anything, I want you to know that I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. I support you. You're heard. This must be rough. I would not even wish this on you. So just that validation of their
Mhm.
experience, and that you're there if they need and they want to reach out.
And dietary advice is never necessary. I know that, I heard one of your podcasts where they're like, oh, you should try this when you're having a struggle with a child, getting the child to even eat, right? And
Yes.
you have people say, no, don't give them that. And the judgment and the stigma of not doing what society thinks you should be doing.
Oh, absolutely. I have friends who they have 16-year-olds or 18-year-olds that still use the bottle. Okay. And you have, obviously, at a certain period of time, people feel like, okay, the bottle stops. You don't expect to see a 16-year-old, 18-year-old using the bottle. And so just not judging that person, because you just don't know the battle that they go through on a day-to-day basis. And don't think that they didn't try everything. Don't, that it's just like, oh, well, this is, the only wants to drink out of a bottle. No, that mom probably tried so many treatments, brought so many therapists in, and it's just what soothes that child. There's
Yes.
children who don't want to wear shoes to school, and they're forced, by their parents because that's what's acceptable. And so then you're met with that, the meltdowns and the frustration because they don't want to wear the shoes because it's a sensory issue. It just
Mhm.
doesn't feel right. Like, you ever had a tag on you and you're like, oh my gosh, like I need to cut this tag off, right? That's what it feels like to them.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So I think that what you're saying, of course, is it makes sense to let people know that you're there. I know just from the work we did with people what you currently do with people in
Mhm.
recovery, is that feeling of being isolated and helpless.
Yeah,
It- It's it's the worst, right? It will
absolutely.
lead to these feelings of suicide, and I think that we all need to do a better job of being there for people, just to even be a sounding board, or
Right.
hey, I'm here, and
And they don't
building
just,
that relationship, so there's comfort that you could come to me, that you wouldn't be
yes,
afraid to ask for something that might
yes.
seem outlandish to a normal person, that or
Hmm.
normal whatever. Sorry, I said that word, but
No, no, it's okay. Yeah, I mean, and it's just, and people think like that it has to be something like, well, it could just be like, hey, do you want me to bring you something to eat? I had one autism mom who was sick. She has two boys. She is like a powerhouse, and it's just her. And she had got really, really sick and wasn't physically able to take care of her boys, but she didn't have no one to help her. She just powered through. I mean, really bad. I think she ended up being hospitalized. But I said to her, I said, like, what can I do if there's anything I could do? And no, she was, sometimes we put on this brave, no, nothing, I got this. Well, you're like laying in bed, melting in your sheets. And so I ended up ordering food for her. I'm like, let me get her some Chinese food. Like, let me get her something that she likes and enjoys, just to remember, so she can know that if there's someone out there that really cares, that really cares.
Mhm, mhm. And you do really care.
Yeah.
What does the perfect day look like for Rashidah Cartwright?
Quiet, silence. You don't realize how, in the autism world with the stimming, it becomes white noise. Like, it's just, other people will come by and they'll be like, oh my gosh, the child's loud. I'm like, oh wait, what? Because I'm just so used to it. And so just being in quiet, when the kids go to school, maybe I've taken a day off, and just being able to sit and just feel like, whoa, I remember what this was like. Like, I'm not just a caretaker, but I'm me. I'm me, and I can enjoy things like the air, the air coming on my face, or I can enjoy a meal without having to jump up 1,000 times, because I don't know what's happening, or trying to, de-escalate something. That I
Mhm.
don't hear and this goes for like, moms of neurotypicals, and I'm sure they experience that too, where it's just like, oh my God, can we change the name mom to something else, because they constantly are just mom, 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 mom.
Mom,
Yeah,
mom,
yeah.
mom. Sorry, I just ruined that for
But
you.
that's what happens. So quiet is just so important to me, because it just reminds me of me.
Mhm. Mhm. And I think that a lot of the listeners can relate, because for many of us, we're just finally finished with working and or having a moment to remember who we were
Yeah.
back, decades ago, before
Mhm.
work and all the responsibilities of life really hit us. And as a mom with children with autism, you probably feel 10 times more than we do. So,
And a lot of moms are stay-at-home moms. They've had careers prior and had to give up that to be able to support the needs of the child because of the many therapies.
right, right. So, what can we look for in the future with you? Anything new happening in 2024? You're going to continue with the podcast? Do you have anything else in your mind?
Oh, it's a global movement. It is a global
Yeah,
movement.
good for you.
Oh my goodness, I'm trying to take over the world. And so basically, I got a conference that I'm working with another organization. So that's coming out, an autism conference in New Jersey, first of its kind, caretaker. Yes.
Finish
So
this year.
yes, yes.
Awesome.
So that is on the horizon. Events for moms to get together, to have a day. I would love to do, I don't know if we're going to do retreats this year, but next year I'm hopeful that we could do some retreats, take some moms out, paid, they don't have to pay anything, just to have time to reconnect with themselves. Also, I've started doing some, workshops to be able to educate people more. And just to get out the word out is important to me. I would love to do more speaking engagements, just especially for providers so they can understand, pediatricians so they can understand, IEP team so they can understand when that mom is sitting there and it's like just looks too through and seems like she's, being combative. Yeah, that what she has a lot of things that you don't see going on, right?
Can
Some
you
moms.
just tell some of the older people here what an IAP is?
So it's an individual education plan. So when an
IAP.
individual, yeah, so when an individual has a diagnosis of ADD, ADHD, there's a plan set in place of the services that will help to meet their needs. So my son has occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech therapy, and it outlines like how many times a week he'll get it, how often, and the goals. It's like a treatment plan, the goals and things like that. So, but we just got to remember that mom is contending with so many things, doctor's visits and how to manage meltdowns in a doctor's office.
So if people want to learn more about you and your mission, where would they go?
They would check me out on my website, autismforbadassmoms.com. You'll get a lot of like resources. You'll see some of the badass moms that we've had on the show. We have some business-minded autism moms on there. A lot of moms have created their own nonprofits because they were stay-at-home and they wanted to do something, and also to help others. We've had moms on there who've created books and just done beautiful things. They've learned to adapt. And you can see me on Instagram and Facebook at the ABM Podcast. And again, it's at the ABM Podcast. And eventually, once I get a little more techie, you'll see me on YouTube. You'll see me on TikTok. I'm on LinkedIn right now. So again, this is a global movement. You'll see me on TV
We'll
eventually.
see you, and you're doing great things. And I am so proud to be your friend.
Mhm.
Thank you for coming on the show, and
Thank you.
good luck. And let us all know how we can support you better.
No, thank you so much for having me on the show. Thank you, listeners, for taking the time out and just be good to another person. That's all that matters.
Wonderful. Thank you, Rashidah.
Bye.